All praise belongs to Allah, and peace and blessings be upon His final messenger. Today, we're going to look at the claim of the idolaters of Mecca, the Quraysh, that they made about the teacher of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. We mentioned before that they could not make any claim because of what they know from the Prophet ﷺ. And basically, if you want to put it forward again from another perspective, they had to find someone that would fit two specific criteria. The first criteria was that this person, this teacher, would live in Mecca, because they are saying that every day and every night he's getting the stories from this teacher that he then conveys. And we mentioned before that the time the Prophet ﷺ spent in Mecca was 13 years, actually the majority time of his prophethood. So this teacher surely could not be somewhere far, especially back then when there were no trains or airplanes where you could just disappear and come back very quickly. But yeah, the houses were very wide apart. If anyone was leaving the area, everyone knew each other. Every strange person was being noticed, and every person that wanted to travel to another city, to another place, would be seen. And on top of that, if he would be able to sneak out, it would be a long time until you reach another city or something. It was not just, oh, the next city is a half-hour walk, but people used to walk for days, for weeks, sometimes for months to reach other places. So they knew that this teacher that Muhammad ﷺ has, he needs to be able to bring him the contents of the Quran here in Mecca. And the second condition or the second criteria that needed to be fulfilled is that this person needed to belong to another race and faith. Because if it was amongst their own people, they would knew it. They knew their own people. And we mentioned before, they were called the illiterate, the people of ignorance, not for nothing, but because these were attributes in them. Like we said, that the Quran confirmed these attributes. So it needed to be from a different race, a different faith as well, because where does these stories come from? Because they don't know any of these stories from the religion of their forefathers. So this is what they were looking at. A teacher in Mecca, preferably with a different race and with a different faith, that is in the position that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ could sneak up to him in the day and night and get all these messages from. So they went and searched and searched and searched and analyzed the Meccan society. And it is very embarrassing what they came up with, because at the end they were not able to find anyone that would only fit these two criteria than a Greek blacksmith, a young man that just knew the tools, to use the tools of smithing swords and other stuff. And yes, he could speak a foreign language, he could read and write, what they could not. But he was a young blacksmith, it wasn't a scholar or someone. And they went on and seriously made the claim that this young blacksmith was the teacher of Muhammad ﷺ. Like, this young blacksmith is the one who is teaching the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ all these things and giving him all these prophecies and all these things what happened before him. And he's even a teacher to the Jewish society and the Christian society, because we said the Quran has this teacher position over Judaism and Christianism, and it corrects them in these aspects. So a young teenage smith is the source of all this, basically. And this shows that how desperate and frustrated the Meccans were. And it shows that there was actually no one, no one suitable to attribute this claim to, but that they were so frustrated and they wanted to so hardly go against Islam that they just said, come on, this guy has to be it. And this shows us again the thing that they did before, because before we had the story as well of Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, who was asked about the Quran, and then he was thinking, and he said a lot of bad things about the Quran. And in one of the narrations, they came to Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira because he was one of their elders and he was very eloquent in the speech, and he used to be a poet. He knows the poems very, very well. And they used to tell him, well, let's say he's a poet. And he said, no, but I cannot say it's a poet, like his words are not poetry. Because what we have to mention here, and that will become more a part of the second investigation as well, the second part of the book, is that the Arabic language had like two columns, basically, two pillars. The one was the normal speech and the other one was the poetry. Okay, so these were the two styles of the Arabic language, and we said they were masters of the language. When the Quran came, it did not fit in any of these two categories because it did not follow the rules of normal speech, nor did it follow the rules of Arabic poetry. So they couldn't put it in there. And then they ask him, okay, let's say he's a madman. And they say, I know the speech of madmen. They're not talking like that. And then even they said, and this is funny, they said, let's say he's a magician. And then he says, I know the magicians and what they are, the fortune tellers and magicians. I met them, I traveled. None of them says things the way that Muhammad says. And I say, so what are we going to say? And Al-Walid said, let me think about it. And he went and he thought, and he came back and he says, let's stick with magician. See, the point I wanted to bring this narration is to show you that they were frustrated to come up with anything. They needed something because he already dismissed calling Muhammad a magician. And now he said, let's just go with magician. Why? He said, yeah, because I thought about it. And magicians, what they do, they put magic on a husband and wife, for example, and they split them. They make them split. So they get divorced and they hate each other. And Muhammad he came with this message. And a lot of people entered the message and other family members did not enter. So he split the families. So he is a magician. Let's say it from this perspective. And it shows again that they were just so desperate to put some explanation to this phenomena that was bothering them because of their desires, not because they were not being able to see that this is true, but they were arrogant. And this is the same thing with this young blacksmith guy. When they came up with him, we don't even need to go in detail why this is the most horrible and biggest failure in an attempt to find Muhammad Sallallahu teacher. But it's sufficient to say that they were so desperate, they needed to find anyone, and there was no other that would fit their criteria in Mecca. And from another race, being able to read and write, what elevates him already from them because they knew these kind of stuff, than this Greek blacksmith. And as if this ridiculous attempt was not enough on its own, the Quran comes here and a verse is being revealed that gives them basically a KO argument that makes them even look more stupid in them choosing this candidate for being Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam teacher. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولقد نعلم أنهم يقولون إنما يعلمه بشر لسان الذي يلحدون إليه أعجمي وهذا لسان عربي مبين. And the meaning of this verse in Surah 16 verse 103 is following. And we surely know that they say, no one is teaching him except a human. But the man they refer to speaks a foreign tongue, whereas this Quran is in eloquent Arabic. So for those of you who may have missed how strong this argument is, we spoke before about the eloquence of the Quran and that they themselves agreed that this speech, they never heard of its eloquence before, and that the Quran challenged the poets and in the Arabic society, the masters of the language, to be able to match it in its like grammar and in its style and in its eloquence. And now they come, like to show how absurd the argument is, they are trying to say, like they're so much focused on finding someone Muhammad SAW could get the information from, that they totally forgot that the language here matters as well. Like they totally forgot about this aspect that if we attribute the Quran to a foreign teacher, that is a young guy, that his Arabic is broken, that he cannot even not even talking about being able to do poems in Arabic, like on any standard, then how are we going to explain this big problem that we have opened for us now. And the Quran embarrasses them further with this verse, saying like until what extent you want to be stubborn? Until what extent you want to embarrass yourself just to oppose this message? And I think that after this verse was revealed, a lot of these idolaters, if not all of them, when they heard from this verse, they felt the embarrassment and they wished for themselves that only if they would have stayed silent, basically. And not only did they embarrass themselves, not only did they attribute the contents of the Quran and the language of the Quran to someone who was totally not qualified, but as well they overlooked so many other things as well. Like basically this blacksmith was living in Mecca, like he was having residency allowance to stay there and work there. And Muhammad ﷺ was not the leader of Mecca. They were the leaders of Mecca. Muhammad ﷺ was kicked out of Mecca. What would prevent them to go and grab the guy and say, hey, no, you're gonna teach us and we're gonna get this information as well, and then we're gonna oppose Muhammad ﷺ. We're gonna expose him and we're gonna expose his religion and make his followers leave. And it just stacks one thing after another, like as if not one embarrassment wasn't enough, that you admit your own ignorance, you say that this guy, he's maybe the one who has all this info, and then this guy turns out to be ignorant, but in a less level of ignorance than you. And and then he's in your society and he cannot speak eloquent Arabic, and they had all these problems, and I would not want to even know how they must have felt after this intellectual defeat. And today we see people, historians, Orientalists, that desperately want to embarrass themselves like the people of Muhammad ﷺ did at that time. And they go through the historical garbage, they try to find something to be able to attribute the message that was given to Muhammad ﷺ to. And they come up with more embarrassing claims. Like we mentioned before, that Muhammad ﷺ used to get the message from Bahira, the Syrian monk that he met as a 10-year-old boy in one session. It was totally embarrassing. Or from Waraqa ibn Nawfal. And we have to know, like, the Quraysh, they did not even they made this stupid claim, but they did not go so far and made this other claims that we're talking about. They were on another level of stupidity that some of the Orientalists today make. So my advice to them would be, it's enough embarrassment. Yes, you can get away with these embarrassing claims and not being exposed in front of people who don't know history. But anyone with a sound mind who goes and analyzes the claims you're making, that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with 10 years used to get the whole Quran, 30 years after he comes with prophethood and he builds a world of meaning and a world of a new society and a new government from things that he learned as a 10-year-old boy in one session, in the most eloquent Arabic speech. I would just tell those people, stop embarrassing yourselves. Take a lesson from the embarrassment of the people of Muhammad ﷺ and know that if there would be any better candidate than this blacksmith, that they would not hesitate to try to attribute the Quran to that teacher, even if it would mean their own embarrassment. And I want to make you aware again of this pattern that we recognize whenever we see these claims that are being made against the Quran, that the Quran is from someone else than Allah, and that Muhammad ﷺ used to write it himself, or that he used to get it from the other human teacher. We see this pattern that this confusion of the makers of these claims, that they try to say one thing and then they jump to other things, and then they go to the left side, they see, oh, this opens another type of problems. They go to the right side, this opens another type of problems. Basically, it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reports their situation, their state in the Quran in Surah 21, verse 5, that states, they say, this Quran is a set of confused dreams. No, he has fabricated it, meaning the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. No, he must be a poet. So they're jumping from one claim to other. And this is the same pattern that we see with today's Orientalists or historians who try to debunk Islam. Some of them say was a madman. Some of them even went and said he had epilepsy, like he was in a mental ill state. And then they noticed, oh, if you say he's a madman or he was mentally ill, how are we going to explain things that were intellectually super sound? Like, and then when they said, okay, he was a genius, he was a super brain, then how do we explain things that he could not have known? And things he was like predicting from the future, and things that from other scriptures that he used to know. So then they jump around between all these different claims, and they defeat each other. It's a situation even when you see them circling around on these claims and defending these claims and trying to desperately find a reason to disbelieve. You feel actually a type of pity for them, and you think like, why are you doing this to yourself? Just accept it. Just accept that there is no other explanation than the Quran being from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Quran does a very beautiful job in explaining to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam the intention of these people, the motives of these people, and doing all these efforts against him. Because he was the trustworthiest person in his society. A whole life of trustworthiness he used to live amongst them. And he even deserved to get this nickname from them, Al-Amin, the trustworthy. And after his prophethood, he got actually upset because someone he never, like 40 years he lived amongst the society, he was never called a liar. Now he is getting called a liar, and people are rejecting him. And it was affecting the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the following verses in Surah 6, verse 33. We certainly know that what they say grieves you, O Prophet. But it is not your honesty they question. Like, it is not because, like, they're not questioning that your honesty, or they're not like accusing you of a lie in reality. But the reality is what comes now. But it is Allah's signs that the wrongdoers deny. Like, they don't want, like, they know the consequences of them accepting the message, meaning that they cannot do anymore what they want, and they want to stick to their nationalism, they want to stick to the religion of their forefathers. So don't take it, basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling his prophet, don't take it personally, O Prophet. It is not because they see something in you that justifies this behavior. It is just they don't want to accept, like they're too arrogant to submit themselves to God the Almighty. And with that, we finished our investigation about Muhammad's teacher, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We came to the conclusion that there could be no other human teacher for Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to get the Quran from. But we haven't yet 100%ly, for the hyper-skepticals of us, solved the problem of, okay, if it's not the human teacher, where does it come then from? Like, what's the source? Like, we haven't definitely tackled this issue and answered it. And this is what we're gonna do in the next chapter, and it's gonna be the last chapter in this investigation that goes through the life of the Prophet ﷺ, like the first investigation in the book. And yes, we're gonna look closer at the revelation and how it was sent and other narration and things, and try to find out, okay, we know now, the stage that we are at now is that Muhammad ﷺ could not have written the Quran himself from his own mind, nor could he have had a human teacher. So where is this source? What is this source? And we're gonna nail it down in the next chapter, inshallah. And just a disclaimer that all these things we mentioned in these investigations, no one should understand it that as if that these are the only evidence and proofs we have for each chapter, but it is a compilation of proofs and evidence that the author has collected, and there are many, many more supporting evidence for these things, as if these were not already enough. But yeah, we're gonna look at another set of evidences and proofs and things that gonna like narrow the circle down of the investigation and bring us to one conclusion about the source of the Quran. I'm excited as always. I hope you're as well, and see you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum.